I'm Dan.
And I'm Alex.
It's beginning to look a lot
Like Christmas.
It's December.
Woo! Could you believe it when
you
you woke
feeling-
up on December 1st and you were like, it's December already?
Yeah, I mean, every time, this has been happening to me throughout November, every time I've been catching a glimpse at the date, huh? This is, oh, okay, this is correct. This is where we are. We are in the last few weeks now of 2023.
It's so strange to me. Like, how is it already December? I feel like it was just February, and it's scary how much time speeds up with every year.
I know. That is the thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Although on flight, do you feel like flights, the more you fly, especially in premium cabins, the quicker the flights feel?
Yeah, of course. I think I remember thinking when I was younger that if, in a premium cabin, it didn't matter if the flight said 18 hours. I mean, if the flight said 23 hours, it's fine because of now even, I mean, because of the frequency that we fly or the frequency, flying for work and so on. Now, even on some flights in the most beautiful cabins, I can be tapping the screen thinking, oh, we still have 4 hours left. It depends. It depends. If I want to get there, if I'm not fussed about where I'm flying to, then I'm like, you know what? 43,000 feet suits me just fine.
I mean, of course, your flights to LA were like that. But I feel like that often, any flight over 5 hours, I'm starting to feel like, okay, we can speed this up a bit. And the bad part is that
Wrap it up.
Wrap it up, guys. At least in business. And first, it's a bit different. But in economy, obviously, the shorter, the better. I don't even understand. I was just reading the other day, like a discussion on people talking about when people fly from India, for example, to the US in economy all at once. I sound like such a snob now, obviously, but that's an incredibly exhausting trip, especially given that most flights leave India at like 3 a.m., whether you're going to Europe or the Middle East.
It's true. And most of those travelers will have the choice to be able to stop over for the night. But then for most, it's about just getting there, not about making that journey, more comfortable with an overnight and so on. So you're right.
Might need visas for many of the places they're transiting to, which makes it a bit more complicated.
Yeah, which is why it's always so important for airlines to continue to invest in the product that is in economy class to make sure that economy is as comfortable as possible, because the airlines that have a decent economy class product, those passengers are able to benefit from the fact that ultimately they don't need to dread it. We know that when you're flying economy, if it's a decent product and you've got ample space and leg room and so on, and a decent recline and a nice in-flight entertainment and perhaps a window seat if that's what you prefer, and you're on an aircraft that's a 350-1000 or an A380, then you know that there is, at least it's going to be comfortable and you don't have to dread it. Because you're right, some of these routes, I mean, when you check Flight Radar and you know that people are not just flying from, for example, from the Middle East to the other side of the world, to the west coast of US, for example, but they will have started their journey from the Far East, and they're going that way round instead of that way round. Wow. I mean,
it's insane.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it really is. I think about my cousin who, when the COVID lockdown started, was trapped he wasn't trapped, but he was in New Zealand. So literally the other side of the world from Sweden. And his family was frantically trying to get him home, my aunt and uncle. And the only airline, as we know, that basically continued connecting very remote parts of the world was Qatar Airways during the pandemic. So that was the one option left. It was $3,500 one way from New Zealand to Sweden in economy class. But they had no choice. His family was definitely going to get him home. So it was nonstop, Auckland to Doha, 17 hours. My cousin is over 190 centimeters, 6'3". So I was just thinking, how is he going to do this? He was with his 3 friends who are also that tall. So I was just, of course, at least with my aviation knowledge, I was thinking, please have an exit row. Please have an exit row. They weren't willing to pay, even though they paid $3,500 for the ticket. But when check-in opened, for some reason, pretty much all the seats in the rest of the cabin had been filled up. but the exit rows were all completely empty. So perhaps it was because they had the highest of high fares in economy, but I managed to get them the exit row on that 17-hour flight, which
Oh, that's good.
that's just a lifesaver, especially if you're that tall, and then have an overnight at Hamad Airport before another connection to Sweden.
It's a lot. All of these ultra long hauls, and that's what fuels the debate about whether or not it is a preference of a passenger to fly ultra long haul and get the whole journey done in one, or if you prioritize a stop, just at least stretch your legs and walk a bit and feel, not as tied to your seat area as you just have been for all those hours. And I think until today, we're speaking now in these last few weeks of 2023, there are still just as many people that prefer to make that stopover as there are who would pay the same amount and happily just go the whole way without stopping and arrive sooner.
Yeah. Nonstop flights or long flights are really for people who are short on time, who just want to get there as quickly as possible. For me, for anyone who has any extra time, I would say it makes so much more sense to break up the journey as much as possible, just for your health, first of all. So you're not just sitting for 17 hours and then maybe even more if you're connecting. Thank goodness Singapore Airlines, for example, doesn't have economy on the longest flight in the world, but they have had flights on that route with economy. And then people are connecting to India, which is another 5 hours.
But just for some context to that, so when you say that Singapore Airlines doesn't have economy on the longest flight in the world, that's because the lowest cabin that they offer on that route is premium economy, right?
Yes, which
So-
personally, I think for anyone, 18 hours in premium economy is not exactly a breeze either. 18 hours in business is not exactly a breeze.
Well, we get it. You need a bed, okay? We get it. Your point is crystal clear. I mean, the fact that I just filled you with horror reminding you that even premium economy is an option, and you're like, don't send me there.
Pretend you would do that flight in premium economy.
Don't change the subject. We were talking about you. Anyway, let's go to the news before we start
Okay,
talking
let's
about me.
quickly go to the news. So in news, Alex refuses to fly premium economy.
No. So I fly premium, and also premium is actually
You fly
we've got a
premium
question about this.
cabins, not premium economy.
1 second. We have a question about this later, which is very, very relevant, about premium economy versus business class on a daytime flight. So let's save that for the Q&A, but let's genuinely move into some bombshell news in the industry that dropped on a sleepy Sunday and shook the global aviation sector, which is that the Alaska Air Group in the US, one of the largest airline groups on the west side of North America, have agreed to buy its rival Hawaiian Airlines in a $1.9 billion deal. This is as the US government and US regulators are actively trying to fight consolidation, which is where airlines, instead of competing, decide one just purchases the other and it's absorbed into either the same brand or they maintain different brands and so on. And on the whole, consolidation, basically fewer competitors, is not great for us, the consumers, because airlines are able to offer more competitive pricing when they are competing. And obviously, if one has purchased the other, that removes a competitor. So it's significant news that nobody saw coming. And given that you are the American voice of the podcast,
I think
wanna
you
throw this
speak
to
more
you.
American than I do on the podcast. Come on, give us that
Jerry,
accent.
Jerry, did you hear that? He's okay. No, go. I wanna know. What did you think when you saw this announcement drop? How did you find out? And what's your instinct reaction here to share with us on the podcast? Because this is big.
Well, this morning I found out on social media, and I think when people think of US airlines, they tend to be, okay, United, Delta, and American. Those are the global carriers, which is what comes to mind. And then even though Southwest is actually the biggest airline in the US, many people forget that. They they tend to be in the background. Then there's JetBlue, which we talk about on the podcast, and Alaska. And then the smallest of the still quite big airlines that are not just regional is, of course, Hawaiian. Hawaiian also doesn't really tend to be top of mind since it's obviously very remote, mainly for people flying to or from Hawaii. So I've never flown them. I've never been to Hawaii, but I've flown every other airline in the US. I'm a big fan of Alaska. So when I saw this, we've spoken about Virgin America on the podcast as well. And a few years back in when was it, 2016, 2017? I think 2017,
like
right? Alaska purchased Virgin America and they had such a strong brand. We both clearly loved the brand. Virgin America knows. Making a review.
Yeah, we've done that. Yep. Okay, keep
Third
going.
episode in a
We
row.
did that on the last episode. Yep. Okay, go on.
We
Honestly,
loved the
bring
brand.
back the discussions of bring back the discussion of Gothenburg. I mean, that was less like that
Yeah.
had me.
One day,
Clench my
Hawaiian
teeth
Airlines
less.
will fly to
Yeah.
Gothenburg direct from Honolulu. I swear. No, so
Inshallah.
So Alaska, unfortunately, dissolved the Virgin America brand, which was beloved by a lot of people. And Hawaiian is also a brand that is beloved by a lot of people. It has a really strong island culture. You board. The crew is wearing clothes that evoke a feeling of Hawaii and vacation. It just gets you in the Hawaiian spirit. And they serve free meals on all their flights to the mainland US, which crazily enough, on all other US airlines, even if you're flying from, let's say, Houston or Chicago, I think it's still this way, at least it was historically this way, it's considered a domestic flight, even if it's 8 or 9 hours, meaning they only serve food for sale. There is no free food whatsoever, which is obviously a huge preference for Hawaiian. So when I saw this, I was like, uh-oh, here we go. Hawaii or Alaska Airlines long haul coming soon to a town near you. The part of this that really excited me was that Hawaiian, the brand, will remain separate. They will operate separately, but they're going to have a much stronger partnership, including Hawaiian Airlines joining One World. And both of us, of course, are loyal One World travelers. So I think you would enjoy the benefits of that too when you move to LA and you're going on vacation to, Honolulu.
Well, it's, something, for the diary. The reality is that this deal, as I said, this deal further if it goes through, and this deal is subject to the US regulators ultimately deciding whether or not the previously and still being discussed JetBlue and Spirit deal can go ahead. And then ultimately the outcome of that will most likely determine the verdict as to whether or not Alaska are going to be able to acquire Hawaiian that they want to. I mean, Alaska will be taking on the debt of Hawaiian because it isn't the most
million.
profitable carrier. Yeah, so that's a lot. So just under $1 billion of debt. But this is something that they want to take on. It's also an interesting shift for two reasons. Firstly, when Alaska took on Virgin America, that brand that everybody loved, including us, they were a Boeing airline ultimately introducing Airbus aircraft into its fleet. And so they would have a mix of Boeing and Airbus jets. And ever since the acquisition, Alaska have spent years whittling down Virgin's fleet of Airbus jets in order to streamline its fleet back to being the Boeing fleet. And they've been doing this over some time. Only to now, in this last chapter of 2023, to announce the desire or the first move to purchase Hawaiian, which will bring them straight back to where they started in having a mix of Boeing and Airbus jets, both a mix of narrow body and wide body. So, okay, why is that an issue? For many airlines, streamlining your fleet to a consistent type is the efficient part of the business plan. For some airlines, specifically for big global international carriers, it's a given that you have to have a mix. And that's why when you look at big airlines like British Airways, Lufthansa, Emirates, and so on, you will see that mix of aircraft everywhere. But for an airline like Alaska, which is predominantly flying domestic routes, and it's not got the big international stage presence as a global airline, it makes sense for them to streamline with one fleet type. You only have to invest in pilots to fly on one manufacturer, and then jumping from one to the other is a much more simple process in terms of the training required. You only need to train your cabin crew on one manufacturer. You only need spare parts, engineering, ground services, and so on for one manufacturer if you streamline your fleet. And that makes everything cheaper because of the economies of scale and so on that all follows that. for you to then mix in a whole other manufacturer and their spare parts and the requirement to train their crew on separate simulators, on separate engineering, and so on, you're making things a whole lot more expensive. Now, this is not something they will not have considered. Of course, they will have known this. This is all part of the deal to acquire the airline. It's just funny that they end up back where they started after years trying to, to whittle out the former Airbus fleet prior to that acquisition. The second point is, as you said, it's so important that the Hawaiian brand remains because it is arguably one of the largest ambassadors globally of their home state, with Honolulu being their strategic hub. And it is, Hawaiian for a long time has been about, Hawaii to the world, yes, but more importantly, bringing the world to Hawaii. And that Hawaii experience begins the moment that you step on board. So it's of an abundance of importance and so on that brand remains. And I think they know this, and this is why in the announcement last night, I mean, you saw this morning, you said, but I had seen this on Sunday evening, that the brand will remain, and that this is still going to be, because it's just so important to the people of Hawaii.
And what many people might not realize is that Hawaiian is somewhat of a connecting carrier. At least they can offer that because they fly to Australia, New Zealand, a few cities in Asia, Korea, Japan, for example. This will sort of enable Alaska to have a bunch of connectivity, especially from let's say, the left side of the United States, going down to Hawaii, connecting to Australia, New Zealand, maybe to some extent Asia, although it's not as direct of a routing. So yes, this unlocks some possibilities for Alaska, but I think many people are left scratching their heads about these mergers we're seeing in the US because, okay, Alaska and Hawaiian don't seem to have much in common. Then you look at JetBlue and Spirit. JetBlue is one of the best airlines in the US, if not the best, while Spirit is certainly one of the worst. So there's all these very conflicting mergers happening, or attempts at mergers happening, while in Europe, we're seeing at least more logical mergers. So for example, Air France KLM snapping up SAS. Can you imagine if we had seen Air France KLM try to snap up EasyJet, for example? That would have been almost similar to what we're seeing with JetBlue and Spirit.
Yeah, you're right. And it's funny because this reminded me of the Lufthansa group's, constant focus on trying to assess what airline is ready to be swooped up and made into another brand of Lufthansa. And this is something that big airline groups are always assessing. Europe is ultimately dominated by IAG, the International Airlines Group, which is a British-Spanish group that is the parent company owner for British Airways, Iberia, Vueling, Aer Lingus, Level, and so on. And then on the other side, you've got the Lufthansa group, which of course, apart from just having Lufthansa and Lufthansa Cityline and Cityflyer and Citylink and all these other Lufthansa brands.
Discover.
But also you have Eurowings Discover and whatnot. You have Austrian, which is, again, its own brand and the national carrier of Austria. You have Brussels Airlines, again, ultimately the flag carrier for Belgium. Within that, you have Swiss, a very, very Swiss brand. And it's funny because when airlines try to, and I say this because when big airline groups try to, they want to boost their profitability, they want to bolster their portfolio, this is all driven by the finances. They look at the neighbors and they swoop them up with a nice acquisition that is worth X billion euros and so on. It always comes down to, hold on, what are you doing with the brand? Because when Lufthansa are ruling on decisions to do with Swiss, for example, the Swiss management have told me themselves that they are often having to remind the CEO to protect and to preserve the, quote, Swissness of the brand. I love this word. They said, it's our Swissness. They, stay away with your Lufthansa grey and navy and let us protect what makes Swiss,
Or
and
brown
that's
beige.
so important. And well, and red and the chocolates and the, they have,
Lufthansa has
look
chocolates
at that.
now. Yellow chocolates.
Yeah, Lufthansa has chocolates following Swiss because Swiss were the OG at giving you those delicious chocolates that they offer on all flights. So, it's about protecting the brand. Brussels Airlines. I mean, Carsten Spohr, the CEO of the Lufthansa group, would love nothing more than for Brussels Airlines to just give up its brand and allow it to be another Lufthansa and just operate as another Lufthansa hub out of Brussels. The Belgian people, the Belgian media, the Belgian authorities would always lobby and make it very well known that they didn't want the airline just turned into another Lufthansa thing, but they wanted to protect an airline brand that, while Brussels Airlines might not be the strongest airline brand globally, the heritage there of it dating all the way back to Sabina, which was, the national airline of Belgium
Founded
from
in the 20s.
1923.
Yeah.
Yes, so this is ultimately, that's 100 years ago. And so, of course, they shouldn't just be, swept up into becoming Lufthansa Light based out of Brussels and so on and so on, because these are the oldest airlines in the world. And that first flight that linked Belgium with the UK was in May 1923, almost over 100 years ago. You can see how, and you can see how important a flag carrier and the role that it used to play still continues to have its impact later on, despite all of the modern day acquisitions and the digitalization aviation has had in technology and so on and so on.
My question is,
it's an interesting one.
My question is, do we think that this or any type of airline consolidation is good for customers or bad for customers? Because, okay, you think about an airline like SAS struggling very much financially. If they were to go bankrupt, obviously that's bad for some part of their customers, especially the ones maybe on domestic routes that wouldn't be replaced. But in the grand scheme of things, is it better if an airline is bought and then turned into Lufthansa in disguise, or whatever it may be? For example, Continental or Northwest or US Airways in the US that all disappeared. What is better?
For airlines, it is better to have these deals. Mergers, acquisitions, they ultimately lead to increased profits and better financial health, which in turn saves jobs, creates jobs, boosts economies, and so on. But speaking for consumers, consolidation in the airline industry is a harm to consumers, because the negative outcome is that the effects of the merger itself is just almost always anti-competitive. It just means that when you remove that element of competition, they no longer need to compete as aggressively on price. And as a result, you end up paying more.
Yeah, I guess it depends, because as I said, it's better that they save an airline that might go bankrupt and might disappear completely, of course, for consumers. But then we have the case of Hawaiian, for example, which was profitable before the pandemic. They've struggled to return to profitability. I don't know how they've been this year, but prior to this year, even in 2022, when tourism to Hawaii was booming, they made a big loss. In that case, an airline that was profitable before COVID, I would say, okay, there's not really any reason to buy this from a consumer's perspective. But as someone who's loyal to One World, I can't help but feel like, okay, I'm happy if Hawaiian Airlines ends up joining One World. We'll be able to redeem points on them, earn points on them, and get to Hawaii easier than before.
I'm surprised you haven't been to Hawaii. I would have thought
it's just so far. It's far from. I mean, growing up in Europe, it's a 12-hour time difference, so it seems very daunting. I think if you live in the US, especially on the West Coast, of course you go, but between the fact that it's very expensive in Hawaii and that it's so far, it's just not somewhere that I've rushed to go. But of course, one day I would love to go. Speaking of an opposite climate of Hawaii, I just randomly thought, have you seen Munich Airport from the past week?
Crazy. So Munich Airport literally declared, I respect the fact that after so much snow, and this was like Snowmageddon. I mean, this was a crazy amount of winter storm snow. I saw on their Twitter in the early morning, they didn't just say, we'll give you an update later, we'll try it. They just said from the morning, they said there are no flights until tomorrow at the earliest.
Yeah.
Do not come to the airport. Just exactly. I much prefer when they set the expectation, bam, from the beginning, than the whole, we will give you the next update in 90 minutes, when of course nothing will have changed, but we're giving you that false hope that something, to somebody who can't work out with common sense that, look, the airport is blanketed by thick snow. I mean, those pictures were astounding.
Yes. Did you see that viral photo where that private jet basically it didn't flip, but the nose lifted into the air and the tail hit the ground because of the weight of the snow.
Yeah, so this was an aircraft that was parked and it tipped backwards, nose up again, as you said, because it had just been weighed down by the level of snow that they were experiencing. And obviously, it wasn't just Munich, it was so many parts of Germany and then all of kind of Eastern and Northern Europe. Goodness knows, I haven't heard from Gothenburg in days. They're probably entirely under snow, because if this happened to Munich, I can't imagine what's happening at home, Dan.
I don't know. I don't follow the
We have
news
an
in Gothenburg. Every time I go like to read Swedish news, literally the headlines, it's bizarre. The top headline, the last time I checked it when I was with my mom, I always check it for laughs. The top headline in like Gothenburg's newspaper was "Woman eats spicy sausage, ends up in emergency room." I was like, how is this the top story today in the local news in Sweden's second biggest city? Like, thank God nothing worse happened than that, but it is depressing.
Yeah. Yeah, well, look at that. That's definitely the kind of national front page that all these global airlines, want to be able to fly to. So that represents a city that's a booming global hub for business and tourism right there. Look at that.
Of course.
Dan, sometimes you don't hear yourself, okay? This is why you have no long-haul carriers. And this is why Gothenburg is a hub in only your head and nobody else's.
I know. This Munich thing, not this Gothenburg thing, is a great reminder why you need travel insurance. Because yes, the airlines are supposed to cover you, but you can imagine an airline like Lufthansa in this situation has tens of thousands of passengers, probably over 100,000 being impacted because of all the canceled flights. Guess how long it's going to take them forget getting a free hotel room, even reimbursing your costs, which they are supposed to do legally. It's so much easier if you have a travel insurance just to make the claim, you get your hotel covered and forget about it. If you're somewhere like New York or LA, hotels are $300-$400 on the low end a night. So if you get stuck for 2 nights, you're out a lot of money if you don't have insurance. So please Google that.
So important. As we move into winter, flight disruption increases because of the weather. And so that's why specifically it's worth having.
Speaking of flight disruptions, London Heathrow, for some reason, every December when I start listening to Christmas music, especially when I start listening to the Love Actually soundtrack, Heathrow just comes to mind because obviously Heathrow is a big part of the film. And although I have to say I hate a lot on Heathrow, to me Heathrow is the Christmas airport, maybe largely because of Love Actually. When I think, where do you fly through to get home for Christmas? You go through Heathrow and you feel the holiday cheer. You have, the Christmas specials from M&S and wherever it may be.
You're so right. There is something Christmassy there's something Christmassy about airports during Christmas time, of course, but there's something specifically Christmassy about Heathrow and specifically arriving. And also I find that when I'm flying in December from Heathrow and I'm in the check-in hall, it just looks like everyone there is flying home for Christmas.
And everyone's all
Even throughout
bundled
all of
up
December,
and you get that vibe.
Everyone's bundled up and it's all lovely and fine until there's cancellations and suddenly everything looks horrible. But until that point, it looks really nice. When everything's running smoothly, it's a very nice Christmassy vibe. It's dark from 3 p.m.
That's what I didn't think about.
Yeah, although I found it completely weird. I remember traveling this January. It was like January 12th. And I was flying from Terminal 4. All of the Christmas trees were still up. That is laziness.
But I like it. I mean, January and February.
January 12th.
But January and February are so depressing in Europe. Just keep the Christmas cheer a little bit longer to keep people happy.
No, they should just put the clocks forward earlier. That would be the way out of the doom and gloom of the dark hours.
I mean, both of us don't really spend the winters in Europe, but don't you feel that there's something missing in those early months? that could make it so much nicer to be there than just the gloom of waiting between Christmas and spring?
Well, I always find it funny that, for example, let's talk like work-wise, okay? So conferences, events, ceremonies, and so on. Everyone rushes to have them all take place between October and December, and nobody does anything for January and February. Whereas January and February, people tend to be more available because of the fact that everyone's just rushed to do it by the end of the year, when the momentum is there and the vibe is better. I don't know. I mean, I like it for Europe, when you know that in Europe, every day is getting a little bit lighter and you're on your way to those lighter evenings. That's good, because I think that's really important for just the morale in these European countries that struggle with the long, dark winter evenings that just go on and on and on. But I stand by my point. The Christmas tree shouldn't still be up by January 12th. I mean, that just portrays laziness.
I thought about going home going to Sweden for Christmas, which I am. And
Yeah.
on the one hand, I'm so excited to see my family. My cousin has the most adorable baby. But on the other hand, I was just like, oh, I don't want to go to the doom and gloom and the darkness. And there's never snow there was snow, but there's rarely snow in Gothenburg, because why would there be in Gothenburg? I'm going to preemptively diss it so you don't have to do it. So I don't know. In the north of Scandinavia, there's snow. There's, thick snow. It feels like Christmas. But in much of Europe, it's just like gray, drizzling. Yes, there's at least a Christmas vibe, but it's incomparable to the summer. It's like a completely different place.
I know, and we both have spoken before how we prefer the summer and the sun and the warm months and so on. But also, it's a time, because so many people are not working and they're off, and so much has stopped. Then it is a time to embrace, those days over Christmas and towards New Year. Embrace the whole just being with everyone and not thinking about work and just laughing and joking and playing charades and watching Christmas movies and watching films that you used to watch when you were a kid. And it does give that window of time to do that, because let's be realistic, we're not doing that January, February, March, April, May, June, we're not doing that any other time of the year. So sometimes I think you have to just take that time, throw yourself into stuff that you don't usually do, that we used to do, traditions and just the art of not doing much at all, and being in the kitchen and seeing relatives and all this kind of stuff. Before you know it, everything has resumed and the rat race has returned and the meetings have started, and and then you think, okay, maybe you should have thrown yourself in a little bit more. There you go. There's my
That's
advice
a good
for
reminder,
Dan's
actually.
Christmas 2023.
I'm gonna try to do that. I'm always working like crazy around Christmas because YouTube ad revenue is the highest in December. So I'm always trying to crank out videos in December, which now I'm like, why do they have to make us
why
do
is
that?
Why is YouTube ad revenue higher in December?
Why do you think it's higher?
Because more people are at home and are watching.
No. Well, more
No?
people are shopping. People are spending the most money
Oh,
out of any month in December. So that's why advertisers are having to pay much more to compete. So in fact, most YouTubers see their revenue drop by about 50% from ads in January compared to December. So it's a huge drop, which is why everyone wants to capitalize on December. That's why you see many people do vlogs every day. There's this thing called Vlogmas where they vlog every day until Christmas, which it's not because they just feel like, ooh, let's get in the holiday cheer. It's because they make more money doing it.
no, that's really interesting.
Speaking of Christmas, there is a hot new gift for AvGeeks, although, yes, it is for sale on eBay and stuff, but it's not really something you can buy. It is something you can get for free if you're flying Delta. This went viral on social media because apparently some pilots have basically trading cards, collectible cards of the aircraft. I think it's the aircraft they fly. So you can ask the pilot if you're flying, let's say, an A320, and you'll get this really cool A320 trading card, and then you can try to catch them all. So some people who have collected them all are selling them online for fortunes. But when I saw this, I was just like, this is such a genius idea to make people excited about trying different aircraft types and collecting them all, right?
So is it like, at Disney, people go and they exchange the pins, that kind of thing? Is that the same kind of concept?
Well, I've never been to Disney. Embarrassed.
What?
No, I've never been to Disney. Shocking fact.
What,
No Disney.
to any of them?
No, not a single one. I don't hate
Why?
Disney or
What's the
anything. I've just never gone. Like I like Six Flags, for example, in the US where there's adrenaline. I don't think they have really those types of rides at Disney. Anyway, let's get back to these trading cards. But
What? Whoa. Hold on. You've never, Disney is not just like, teacups and that's it. You realize that there are heavy duty, thrilling rides.
I don't know if they're as thrilling as, well, do you know what Six Flags is?
Sorry. Yes, I know what Six Flags is. Okay. And also the key in that sentence you just said, it started with the phrase, I don't know. Okay. Because you haven't been to Disneyland. But I'm just more shocked that as a half European, half American, Disney's two largest present areas, Disneyland Paris and Disney Florida, you haven't been to either of them. Disney's amazing at any age, not just because it's Disney, but the rides are amazing. I just went to Disney in August.
You did? Where? In London? Wait, no, in Paris.
No, not in London. Okay. Well, you really don't know anything
I don't
about
know
Disney.
anything about Disney World.
Right. I went, no, we drove to Disney in Paris and went on Hollywood Tower of Terror multiple times, which of course means nothing to you, but definitely something to the listeners because it is thrilling. I mean, there's a new ride of the Avengers. It is so extreme. I mean, I can't tell you how much they warn you. If you have neck pain, if you have chest issues, if you have breathing issues, if you have, anything, if you suffer from motion sickness, like don't come on this ride. It's brand new. It's so extreme. We went on it twice. And I was sure I was going to get motion sickness, but I think the adrenaline stopped me. Disney is incredible. You have to go because I think you will be pleasantly surprised. Not only is it state-of-the-art production, as if you are walking in a movie set, but the rides, some of them are thrilling. Like everyone there is of every age. Oh, but Dan has decided that he hasn't been to Disney in London.
But there's also this new kind of joke on social media about Disney adults. Obviously, you're not one of them, but there's those people, especially when the pandemic was ending and people were going to Disney for the first time since COVID, and they were like collapsing on the ground in tears. I'm back at Disney. So it was.
Yeah, okay, that's not. No, they're a diehard Disney folk.
That's a bit
and
over the
there
top.
are forums about it. No, of course, anything to be diehard about is a bit over the top. Okay, it will be diehard. The fans of the Nonstop Dan YouTube channel, I perceive to be in the same category.
They're amazing.
Right? So
they are not like Disney adults.
in your opinion, okay. But the reality is that Disney is such an experience at any age, and the rides are so thrilling. I mean, Dan, I can't quite believe you haven't experienced the magic.
I'm surprised you missed the chance to say when I said I hadn't been to Disney that you didn't say sorry. And then
Yeah, well, I am
proceed
sorry to
say,
hear that.
"I
You're
am
right.
sorry."
You know why I didn't have the time to make that joke? Because I was genuinely shook.
Yeah.
Okay. So, right. Why were we talking about
We were
Disney?
talking
I
about
said to you, was
trading
it
cards. Can I get back to
Delta
my
trading
story,
cards?
please?
Yeah, well,
Well,
you
you know-
can, but the thing is now, my point was pointless because you don't know what that trading pin thing is. Don't get me wrong, I haven't done it, but it's a thing. So you take,
So you
on
must
Delta
be familiar
scenario-
with Pokemon cards, for example.
Well, I've never engaged, but I know what it is.
Okay, when I was young, I used to collect Doctor Who cards, which is, it's just collectible
Sorry?
cards. Yeah, when I was young and lived in the UK, I collected Doctor Who cards.
Oh no, I heard what you said.
What? Do not hate on Doctor Who with David Tennant.
I'm just sorry.
When I was 8 and 9, I was obsessed with Doctor Who. Anyway, that's besides the point. There are a lot of different collectible cards. People collect baseball cards. So this is just another thing. Although there's only, I think it was 12 different cards you can get. It's like a shiny little card with the aircraft type on it. Oh wait, let's see here. There's actually 62 cards, which I wonder, how is that even possible? I don't understand exactly how it works, but Anyway, my point is, I think it's really smart because it gets people engaged with trying to fly the airline more, specifically on different flight times, different routes, to try to get different plane types. Just because people love the idea of collecting things. Of course, as an av
Apparently,
geek,
this is not.
this is amazing to me.
Apparently, this is not new.
No. It's just become viral in the past week, which is why we're talking about it.
Viral on what?
On social media, people were posting about, did you know about this and that?
On TikTok.
Yeah, I guess TikTok and Twitter.
So it's going
Now
to
known
appear
as
for me on
X.
Instagram in 2 weeks.
Yes, or maybe, a few months depending on your algorithm. One question about this, though, is how does it work in terms of you have to ask the pilot for it? So at what point during the flight, either boarding or when you're disembarking, is it appropriate to be like, hey, pilot, can I get a card that they have to fish out of their pocket? Imagine you're boarding an A350 and there's 300 passengers asking for a collectible card. That's not going to be so efficient for the airline.
From age 7 until maybe 14, 15, I used to write the flight crew a letter on every flight. And I used to say, my name is Alex Macheras. I'm 8 years old. I am massively passionate about aviation. I'm super happy to be flying on this A319 today. And I know that the airline, blah, 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 blah. I used to pour my heart out in this letter. And I used to say, if there is any time, I would love to come and visit you in the flight deck after we land, if we have time. And thank you so much. And do you know what? It was always received so well. 8-year-old Alex would be sat in that aisle seat and the crew would be coming after having handed the letter, and she'd have a big smile on her face and she would say, our captain loved the letter. He wanted me to give you this weather chart. He wanted me to give you this copy of the map of today's route.
Did airlines give you those wings? You know, the wings that you
Yes,
get?
yes. Here are a set of wings. And then they would say, and after we land, please come to the front and we'll take you into the flight deck. And I would always be in there for as long as I could after arriving. I used to do that, every single flight, almost every week when we were going back and forth.
You're inspiring me to do it now. I'm a 26-year-old boy back in seat 9C. Please let me come to the cockpit.
Yeah, I'm just an innocent 26-year-old YouTube ad revenue hungry YouTuber. Yeah. Trying to get those clicks. No, but it was always received so well. And I'm always so grateful to the flight crew, especially when I was that young, because those experiences for me, I could not take the smile off of my face for the next 24 hours having been in the flight deck. And obviously, you couldn't do it during the flight post 9/11, but, before and after was always, there are videos of me doing the PA announcements from the flight deck before departure from the cockpit. And my mum would be videoing it in the cabin and I'd be welcoming everyone on board. Because the pilots would be the same crew maybe that we flew out with on a passenger flight, let's say on EasyJet. And they would know me. I would board and they'd turn around and they'd be like, hello, Alex. And I was 8. So that's
so sweet. I was just talking to an Emirates crew, but I was talking to an Emirates crew and they've been there quite a long time. And they were saying how they notice such a generational divide between millennials working as cabin crew and Gen Z working as cabin crew. And it raised a few alarm bells because he was like, most of the Gen Z, they are only coming to Emirates because they want to live in Dubai. They want to post on Instagram. They want to, have the filler steroid life and hang out on the beach. And they could not care less about flying. They just want some job that lets them live in Dubai and it seems glamorous. So, of course, we're talking about someone who is not super young. So you always kind of judge people who are a lot younger, I guess. But his perspective is that these younger crew do not care about the job and do not care about passengers at all. And obviously, having fired a lot of crew during COVID, most airlines are hiring a lot from Gen Z, which made me think, maybe this is why service across the board is generally a bit more sloppy, especially in, economy, even business on some airlines. So then I think if you, 8-year-old Alex or an 8-year-old nowadays, had handed that note to some 22-year-old Instagram girl on Emirates, hopefully she would have responded warmly to it. I would hope that any human would be like, oh, this is so cute. Or would they just be like, weirdo. Stop wasting my time, you know?
God, I hope not.
I really
mean,
hope not. Because he was saying that,
social media is toxic anyway, and
yeah,
I always think that if I was not doing what I did for work, I wouldn't be on it.
same,
And
honestly.
that's why I try and limit
But guys, don't delete your social media. Please keep following.
yeah, yeah,
We're in
please
a
do
weird
continue to follow,
position.
like, and subscribe. I know it is, isn't it? Because, but I think I think we have healthy relationships with social media. I don't think that I like this. I love the connection part of social media. I love the network. I love sharing the passion, enjoying other people's passion, and so on and so on. It's not, there are people that are just on it, and progressively it gets worse in terms of the impact on mental health and so on,
Yeah.
because of the stuff that they're consuming and the way in which it triggers some kind of fear of missing out, or what you're doing is not as great as what this other person is doing, and so on and so on. That side of it is just awful.
Yeah. I have to make a genuine recommendation here that I don't have any relationship to
Yeah.
this company, but I found the most amazing app through a YouTuber who invested in the app. It's called ClearSpace. And basically, if you've ever used Apple's screen time, you know it doesn't work because you set a limit and then you just keep overriding it. You don't care about it. This app, ClearSpace, is like the hardcore version of that. So you set how many times a day do you want to be allowed to go into an app. So for example, for Instagram, I'm allowed 3 minutes, and then you set how long each session can be. So I set 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and 15 minutes. So when I click Instagram, it takes me over to this app. I have to do a 30-second breath exercise first. Then I have to go through this thing where it asks me, are you sure you want to go to Instagram? I go, yes.
Wow.
Then I have to choose how long I want to be on it. And after those minutes have expired, my time's up. It kicks me out of the app and I have to redo the whole process again. And I can genuinely say that this app has pretty much made me stop using Instagram. I'll go in once every few days to your stuff or someone else's stuff, respond to DMs. But I do not scroll Instagram anymore. So if you have problems, going down social media rabbit holes, ClearSpace. It's genuinely amazing.
I've heard of it. I've definitely seen adverts for it. And it's that, isn't it? I mean, I open the Instagram app a lot every single day, but it is to reply to messages. It is to continue the conversation I was having in DM. It is to quickly post a story or so on. But one thing I'm quite firm about is not scrolling, like not pressing that explore button and going from
Yeah,
one to
then
the
you're
other.
screwed.
That's the dangerous part. Yeah, that's the dangerous part. Well, speaking of social media, here are the questions that we welcome and receive via social media from our listeners around the world. Let's get into our Q&A. The first question we have is from Lucy. She says, what do we think of carbon offsets? And with COP28 currently underway in Dubai, is there ever a way that we can achieve guilt-free flying?
Tough question.
Lucy, I think that we will be able to achieve some form of what will be close to guilt-free flying. Basically, flying that has been heavily decarbonized thanks to the tools that we have, like sustainable aviation fuel and so on. Carbon offsets will not really have a significant role to play because of the way in which they are such a long-term measure that all it does is kind of, the clue is in the name. It offsets, but when? I mean, if you're flying X number of miles and then that equates to you needing to plant X amount of trees in order to offset the carbon that you have generated by flying, those trees will not have been grown and be ready to capture the carbon from the atmosphere for 20 to 25 years,
Oof.
aka
It's
not a great
it's a
measure
lot.
that, not really doing much. It's a lot. In the short term, I would be, and I am as an individual, actively lobbying and working towards solutions that will provide us near-term solutions to be able to decarbonize the aviation sector and have air travel reduce its impact on total global CO2 emissions. It's currently at 3%, but it is forecast to grow significantly if we continue to grow as an industry as we are. So for me, that would be sustainable aviation fuel and widening its use, bringing down the cost through government subsidy and increasing the demand through incentives for airlines and so on. And in addition to SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuel, it would be to look at measures to improve and optimize efficiencies, not least with airspace, because we still fly in very inefficient ways in old bureaucratic airspace designs, such as, especially in Europe, where in the EU we could have a single European skies, which would be much more efficient. But this is a document that has sat on the desk of the European Commission for 20 years and nobody's done anything about it. We can explore a deeper dive into it in a future episode, but in a nutshell, we're not flying the most efficient routes that we could be with different altitudes and so on. We're still flying based on maps that were around 20, 30 years ago. And that in turn is increasing the amount that we pollute as a sector. And we can get around that if we push away the bureaucracy and modernize things like our airspace efficiency.
I love how you're speaking for the sector. That's very like, on behalf of the sector, we need to do this. That's nice. I think many people see, for example, some airlines like KLM, hopefully they've improved this, but just a few years back, I remember they would be like, do you want to carbon offset your flight? Only $3 for a flight from Europe to the US. And it's just like, we all know that $3 is not offsetting the carbon for this long haul flight. The airlines just do it to let people clear their conscience, but it's not actually having a big impact. I hate a lot on SAS, but SAS is really because of the sustainability consciousness in Scandinavia. SAS is really serious about it, and they do have an option where people can actually pay to add sustainable aviation fuel to their ticket. Of course, as it should be, it is expensive because we know SAF is expensive. So, for example, if you're flying from Europe to the US on an economy ticket, if you want to add 100% SAF on your ticket, it's going to triple the ticket price. So, how many people are doing that? Realistically, pretty much no one. I also want to point out something that freaked me out. On Google Flights, I only really recommend searching on Google Flights for booking. I guess about a year ago or so, they introduced, have you seen that, where they show the emissions and they compare it, like each flight shows plus, 10% emissions compared to average or less.
Yeah.
So I was searching Singapore to Sydney, and I came across, they've added something that really puts things into context. There was a Scoot flight, which is obviously the low-cost low-cost version of Singapore Airlines, extremely dense configuration on a very efficient plane, the 787. So it says here, if you fly a Scoot economy ticket, you'll have 27% less emissions than average. So 20% less than average. Then underneath that, they write, those 27% avoid as much CO2 as 11,800 trees would absorb in a day, which just made me think, wow. So the difference between, let's say, a Qantas A330 and a Singapore and a Scoot 787 in economy is equivalent to almost 12,000 trees. Can you imagine what the emissions are, or how many trees are required for a first class ticket, for example, on that route? It's really scary. And I was just like, ooh, this is more than I thought.
It put things into perspective, and that's why the answer to the carbon offset thing is that actually you're not doing anything by giving $5 to plant one tree that's going to take 20 years to even capture 1% of the carbon that you have emitted, which is why I always think it's just not worth engaging with so much now that we know there are other solutions that are actually able to help decarbonize, like the fuels.
And frankly, flying airlines that care about sustainability and fly efficient fleets does help and does go a long way, because you have, for example, Turkish Airlines who have explicitly said that their focus is not sustainability. Well, fine, not really fine, but that's their opinion. Then maybe for people who are really passionate about sustainability, they are not the best option. An airline like SAS that is super serious about it might be a better choice, just to send the message.
Yeah, no, that's so true. The next question is from Ricky. He says, hey guys, should I book premium economy for a 6-hour flight over business, given that there is no plan to sleep? I see that the only added value in business class would be that the seat becomes a flatbed. What do you think?
Well, the big question to me is the price difference. Usually,
Yeah.
premium economy is much cheaper. Well, it depends on the airline, actually. For example, Emirates prices their premium economy closer to business than they do to economy, which is very interesting. But then you have Lufthansa, British Airways that charge it much closer to economy. And in that situation, I would say premium economy is enough. Definitely, I would keep it under 6 hours. My personal preference, keep the premium economy flights under 6 hours. That's, maybe 2 to 6 hours is where it shines for me.
Yeah.
It all depends on the price. Let's say it's for a 6 hour flight, it's $200 extra for business, then go business. If it's $1,000 extra, of course you can save your money and go in premium economy.
And on so many of those daytime flights, I find myself never going into the full flat position if
Yeah.
I'm in a business class cabin because I'm working and I'm, or even if I'm just lounging, it doesn't mean I'm in flat bed mode. I'm in the lounge position, which many of those premium economy seats are able to recline to. So it's a good option. Go with your gut, go driven by price and so on. But yes, it's
The one tip I have to give, because I've just done, spoiler alert, a little series comparing premium economy on different airlines. So I hadn't flown premium economy long haul in several years. Now I feel like I'm
Okay.
sort of a premium economy expert. And as a dedicated window seat flyer, I realized in premium economy, the aisle seat is the way to go because the recline is so much more dramatic than in economy that once the people in front of you recline and you're in a business or you're in a window seat, forget about getting out of there without asking them to raise their seats, which on a night flight, awkward. On a day flight, also awkward. So an aisle seat, at least you can get out. You feel a bit more freedom. You'll be bothered by the person next to you getting in and out, but that's just, for me, that's the biggest problem in premium economy, that you feel so trapped once the people in front of you recline.
You have a question?
Oh, yes. I have a question from Brad. Nice name, Brad. That's my dad's name. So he asks...
Sure, this isn't your dad asking the
No,
question.
it's not my dad. It's not. He asks, what are our thoughts on bringing small gifts for the cabin crew on flights? Have you thought about this? Have you ever done this?
I have done it. I've done it a few times, but wasn't always completely random. So I've done it when I knew a crew member that was operating the crew. So I bought operating the flight. So I bought a gift for the whole crew, chocolates basically. Then I did it again when I was stranded in Toulouse for 2 days because of cancelled flights and strike action. And I also happened to know that the crew were also stranded and they're also in the same hotel. And I saw them in the lobby. But I didn't approach or engage or speak or whatever. But then I knew that, okay, most likely that's going to be my crew on the Lufthansa flight on the way back. And by coincidence, I had loads of, I think it was around the holidays, like it was around this time of year, loads of chocolate gifts that I was taking back anyway. So I thought, oh, the crew have been through all of this nightmare with us. So when I boarded, I said, guys, here you go. This is for you guys because I know it's been and they were so grateful and they wrote me a thank you card and everything. That was nice. So I've done it a few times. I think it's a very quick, easy, nice bit of recognition to give, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you give it not expecting anything in return, just as a thank you. It might be nice to carry one around in case you feel like the crew is better than normal. Then that's kind of a way to recognize them. I did it the first time I did it, I bought like a paper, those Lindor boxes of chocolates where there's those round
Yes.
individually packaged things. So it's a paper box,
God,
right?
they are my favorite.
I know.
Oh my God, that's so good. I'm going to order some now. I just realized.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
Let's finish the
on my phone.
podcast.
Yeah, go on, keep going.
So I
I'll do
bought
it
one
while
of
you're
them.
talking.
My suitcase was so full, or my carry-on, that I sort of had to stuff it in. I didn't think much about it. But then the crew came and they were so nice. And I was like, hold on, guys, I have a little gift for you. I told them before I took it out of my bag. So I opened my bag and I realized, oh my God, this thing looks like it's been dragged through the mud. The paper was completely ruined. The chocolates were mushed. I was like, oh.
Did you still give it to them or not?
I did, because most of the chocolates were not ruined. It was
in the
just the
freezer.
box. Yeah. I learned to buy something with a harder box if my carry-on is full. I've just done it a couple of times, but I think the idea is really nice. I don't think it should be,
Yeah.
obviously shouldn't be an expectation to buy it, but I think
No.
I like in theory, having something with me, especially if the crew is great, to give them as a reward, of course, in addition to writing a note to the airline, which is the best thing you can do for them if the crew is good, to recognize them.
To recognize, absolutely. And many airlines have dedicated pages where you can leave your feedback,
Yeah.
which is really nice. Okay, so next week it's competition time again. One of you will be winning the goods that we have on offer in our giveaway. Again, all you need to do to enter is to send us a screenshot of where you are providing feedback to the podcast. Maybe it's leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, maybe it's rating it 5 stars on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts, and someone will be winning that, and it will be announced next week. So you have between now and next week to get that screenshot in to either myself or to Dan.
By the way, we don't discriminate. Your review doesn't have to be 5 stars. If you review 1 star
Well,
and you send it to us, you'll be entered as well.
It's true. I just wanted to, give a nice hint when I said 5-star. But it's a free world. We're all for democracy. Please do feel free to rate and review however you wish to do so. We enjoy and love making the podcast because, not least because we get to catch up, but we get to catch up with a whole bunch of thousands and thousands of listener friends that we now have contributing and giving us the questions and talking points and being in touch. So it is always a pleasure. This wraps up today's episode. Dan, please go to Disneyland between now and next Wednesday.
Okay, that will be achievable, definitely. Let me just book a quick
Let's
flight
get
to
Dan
Paris.
to Disney. Let's get down to Disney. You land in Paris, you get on the train at Charles de Gaulle, you get off at the next couple of stops. I think it's called Marne-la-Vallée, and you're there, and you're in the happiest place on earth. And you're welcome.
Perfect. Okay. So you go order your Lindor and I'll go to Paris real quick.
The Lindor has already been ordered. I'm looking at it. It's 19 minutes away.
Wow. Okay. That's efficiency. Well, enjoy your Lindor. Guys, go and order Lindor if you want to as well. And we will talk to you soon. See you next time
See you later.
on air. Bye bye.
Lanes aglow. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas.